Is Bayonetta better than Devil May Cry 4? Yes. Yeah, it is. What more do you want me to say? When you're asking the question, is Bayonetta better than DMC4, it requires an answer a lot more complicated than a simple yes or no. Hideki Kamiya was the director and creator of the original Devil May Cry, but by the time DMC4 came around, he had no involvement with the franchise. A lot of people point to this as the main reason for a lot of DMC4's problems, but that's besides the point. While the folks at Capcom were working on DMC4, Kamiya was with Platinum Games working on Bayonetta. For most of its lifetime, Bayonetta was just seen as the successor to the Devil May Cry franchise. It was the newest character action game at the time, and it clearly took a lot of inspiration from the Devil May Cry series. Bayonetta came out while DMC was going through one of the worst periods of the franchise's lifetime, and people loved it. Back in 2009, a lot of people were hailing it as like the next Devil May Cry, or the Devil May Cry killer. The point I'm trying to make is that at the time of its release, the common consensus was that Bayonetta was better than DMC4. But was it? I mean, think about it. DMC4 had 3 games before it that I had to live up to and was constantly compared to. Well, more like 2 games because, DMC2 was fucking horrible, but you get the point. Devil May Cry 1 and 3 were seen as some of, if not the best games from the character action genre. DMC4 didn't just have to be good, it had to be better, whereas Bayonetta didn't have to live up to anything. Bayonetta was a brand new gaming IP, and even though it was constantly compared to the DMC franchise, it was still treated as its own separate thing. And obviously that's because it was its own separate thing, but you should understand the point I'm trying to make. And that brings us to the point of this video. Today I'm here to strip away all the shit that doesn't matter and just look at DMC4 and Bayonetta as their own standalone games. No unfair comparisons, no preconceived notions, just one question. Is Bayonetta better than Devil May Cry 4? So let's get started. Alright, so I feel like the gameplay, more specifically the combat, is a pretty good place to start. The combat in Bayonetta is simpler than the combat in DMC4, but that doesn't mean it's worse. In Bayonetta, you have 3 main buttons that you'll be attacking with. A button for shooting, a button for attacking with your hands, and one for attacking with your feet. In theory, this is a really cool concept, and it worked out pretty well in the game. Throughout the game, you unlock and are given different weapons, so it's cool to try out different combinations. Maybe you want the fucking katana in your hands, but the shotgun on your feet. Maybe you want the shotgun on your feet, but the katana in your hands. Wait, no, that's not. The way you create and string together combos are based on the order you press the punch and kick button in. For example, let's say you press the punch button 4 times and the kick button twice. That's a combo. How about the kick button 3 times and the punch button once? That's another combo. How about you press the kick button 13 times and press the punch button fucking 46 times? That one doesn't work because you press the buttons too much, but you get the gist of it. Mix and match these 2 buttons around to keep combos going, and along with these basic punch and kick attacks, you also got some other moves that make the combat more fluid. By using the lock-on feature and attacking while using directional inputs, you can do shit like launchers, gap closers, and downward attacks. These attacks help fill in the gaps that are left during your normal combos. Now, if we switch over to DMC4, you can see that things are a little more complex. For starters, unlike Bayonetta, you have 2 playable characters in this game, and these characters play completely differently to each other. There's a lot more shit to go over if you want to talk about DMC4's combat, so unfortunately it might not be as in-depth as you hope. But regardless, I'm going to try my best. Like I said before, the combat in DMC4 is a lot more complicated, but at the same time it makes defeating enemies a lot more satisfying. Starting off with Nero, he only has 2 weapons throughout the game. Well, I guess technically 3, those being his sword, his gun, and his Devil Bringer. This is in contrast to Bayonetta, who has a multitude of new weapons she gains throughout the game. Instead of giving Nero new weapons throughout the game, he just gains new attacks and moves to improve the weapons he already has. In Bayonetta, you can also gain new moves and attacks during the game. I mean, it even has a similar system where you can buy these moves using a currency you get from defeating enemies, breaking shit, and your ranking level, but the difference is that Nero just has so much more moves. His weapons are just so flexible and adaptable to any situation, whereas Bayonetta has certain weapons for certain situations. It's really just a number of attacks and skills you're able to mix and match with Nero that makes his combat so fun. Being able to launch an enemy into the air and hit them with a mid-air attack and then slam them down and then hit them away from you just so you can pull them back in with the Devil Bringer or hit them with an explosive round. Nero's gameplay just has so much shit going on and so many moves and attacks at his disposal. Creating combos in Bayonetta is fun, and stringing them together with launchers and shit is cool, but I truly think it just can't compare with Nero's complete mastery of his weapons. And I haven't even begun to talk about Dante yet. Alright, so I made a video a while ago talking about how Dante wasn't made for this game and how his combat just doesn't work. It was called Dante from DMC4 Sucks, and it's the most viewed video on this channel. And while I do still agree with that sentiment, I have a different view on it now. Like Bayonetta, Dante gets a fuck ton of ranged and physical weapons throughout the game, but like Nero, each of these weapons has a lot of different skills and attacks to offer. None of Dante's weapons are as multifaceted as Nero's sword, but all of them are a lot more complex than any of Bayonetta's weapons. This combined with Dante's 4 styles and him being able to switch between the styles and weapons at the press of a button makes his combos so fucking cool. One of my complaints about Dante was that switching between these styles and weapons was just too much to handle, but after playing through the game again, I can in fact confirm that it was just a skill issue. Don't get me wrong, Dante isn't easy, but after watching other players use Dante and seeing how they brought all the weapons and styles together in their combat, without a doubt I have to say Dante is better than Bayonetta combat wise, as is Nero. But there is more to the gameplay than just combat. There's level design, enemy placement, the puzzles, a whole bunch of stuff. So I guess we can just start talking about that. And this time I'm going to start with DMC4. I'm sorry to say, but DMC4 doesn't exactly excel in this area. Starting off with its map, I like what it was going for. It had an interconnected world that you'd explore more of during each level. A huge part of this game is backtracking and exploring the area to solve puzzles and shit like that to progress. And sometimes this worked. I don't know about you guys, but I really liked the mansion levels where you're just exploring this huge mansion in this snowy area. I really enjoyed the scenery and like the vibe of this place. And I enjoyed those eureka moments when you find something that opens up a new path or solves something else. But sometimes it's really annoying, like the majority of these jungle levels. Like, I'm sorry, but I absolutely hated these fucking jungle levels, bruh. Quite frankly, the puzzles were shit, exploring was boring, and the constant backtracking was just a pain in the ass. This type of level design worked like 50% of the time, and when it did, it was really fun. Finding secret areas, doing secret missions, it was cool when it worked and it made me want to keep exploring. But when it didn't work, bro, it was fucking bad. It was either boring or annoying or a fucked up mixture of the two. And for some reason, the enemies would be placed in the worst places possible. And that's another thing, some of the enemies in this game are fucking horrible. Just downright horrendous, bro, an absolute pain to deal with. I understand that they tried making enemies that you have to attack in certain ways and that actually require you using your brain when you're fighting them, but when you throw 7 different fucked up enemies at us, it just makes it hard. And the DMC franchise is known for being hard. That's not the issue. The issue is that when I'm getting bombarded by a bunch of enemies, it just feels unfair. Unlike other situations where I can see where I messed up and take steps to improve, when this shit happens, it just feels like the game is fucking me. Now, if you switch over to Bayonetta, in general, I do have less things to say, but I do have more positive things to say about it than I did DMC4. Bayonetta's level design is a lot more linear. There are branching paths and there are a lot of secret challenges and hidden items, but all in all, the level design is pretty damn linear. And I think this works great in Bayonetta. Each level takes place in a brand new area, so you don't ever get bored of the scenery, which was a problem that occurred a lot during my DMC4 playthrough. Another problem is that during my DMC4 playthrough, I just found myself getting lost or just being confused about where I was supposed to be. And I feel like that's a side effect of the constant backtracking, but in Bayonetta, I never had this problem. The puzzles in Bayonetta weren't exactly simple, but they were a lot less monotonous and annoying than some of the puzzles in DMC4. Let me put it like this. The best puzzles in DMC4 were a lot better than the best puzzles in Bayonetta, but the bad ones in DMC4 were really fucking bad, whereas I don't think there really were any bad ones in Bayonetta. To end this section, I want to talk about each game's bosses. The bosses in DMC4 were a somewhat mixed bag, but the majority of them were good. And they were so memorable, like the fight with Credo or Nero's fight with Dante. Even the bosses I didn't like that much were memorable, like the Agnes fight or the fight with that big ass frog, which, I mean, now that I think about it, I did enjoy that fight. Maybe it's just me, but the bosses in Bayonetta were nowhere near as memorable. That's not to say they were bad, some of them were quite good, but I wouldn't say they were great. Off the top of my head, I could probably name or at least describe every boss fight in DMC4, but I could not do the same for Bayonetta. Once again, its bosses weren't bad, but they just don't hit the same as the DMC4 bosses, and they haven't really stuck in my head the same way. Although that may be because the bosses aren't as directly linked to and involved with the story as the bosses in DMC4 are. Which leads into the next topic of the video. Alright, so I guess now I gotta talk about the story for each of these games, but I don't know, it's a bit scuffed. My opinions on anything related to stories and games are kind of weird, so if you disagree with this part, I actually really don't care. I don't know, bro, go comment about it or something. I do not care what you think. But I also do not care for Bayonetta's story. The beginning sequence of the game was cool and interesting, but ever since that point, I just didn't give a fuck. Parts of it were interesting and I was intrigued by the whole being a witch shit and like the world the game takes place in, but after a certain point I just stopped caring. The cast of characters in Bayonetta just isn't that interesting. Bayonetta herself is cool, but I just don't think that's enough to carry a whole game. Alright, so when I'm talking about DMC4, I kind of do have to reference the other games because, you know, it's the 4th game. It's not like it's a new story every time, it's all connected, so, I don't know, disclaimer. Nero is a brand new character to the franchise and the new main character, and I know a lot of people didn't like him, but I loved him. Maybe it's because Nero was closer to me in age because he was a teenager and Dante was a whole ass man. Or maybe it's just because he's cute. I don't fucking know, I just fuck with him. I thought it was cool how he might be Virgil's son. I thought his weird fucking demon arm was cool. I think he's cute. I need to relax, I didn't mean to say that twice. I'm moving way too zesty. I think the whole plotline around the Holy Knights is mad interesting. I mean, I've always been a sucker for villain groups, man. The Espada, the Phantom Troop, the Akatsuki. I always just thought villain groups were cool. To be honest, the only thing I didn't like about this game was Dante. Even though DMC 2 is ass, I genuinely think Dante's design in that game was a lot better than it is in this one. Dante during this game was just in this weird transition phase. He was just not as stylish. He actually came off as weird a lot of the time. He had this gross ass facial hair and his skin was too pale for some reason. I mean, his dad is a fucking demon. You think he'd have a bit of a tan, but nope, just this pale ass skin. And his hair looks goofy. I really don't like Dante's design in this game. His appearance just wasn't hidden for me, and in a game like DMC4, you gotta at least enjoy the character design. Contrary to popular belief, I do think this is one of the better storylines in the series, and even though it has its ups and downs, I still like it. For this section, I'll be fair. DMC4's story was just more suited for me. It's the type of story that I would like regardless, but Bayonetta's story just wasn't hitting for me personally. I'm the type of person where I feel like I can objectively just distinguish between good gameplay and bad gameplay and notice the really minute shit things in their gameplay. Like, for taking my opinion out of it, even if I don't like the game, I can still say, oh, that's good, or oh, that's fucking DMC 2. But when it comes to comparing stories, I'm not him, to be honest. I'm just not that guy. So even though I prefer DMC4's story, I'll just leave this as a draw. And there you have it. I've gone over and compared a bunch of shit in these games. Some parts are better than others, some parts are really bad. That nigga Nero is cute as hell, bro. This all comes back to the question, is Bayonetta better than DMC4? Fuck no, nigga. Hell no. Absolutely not. In my professional, extremely knowledgeable opinion, DMC4 is a much better game. Well, maybe much better is a stretch, but I just like DMC4 a lot more than Bayonetta. I'll be the first one to admit that DMC4 is an incredibly flawed game, but I love it regardless. If you can look past its many flaws and problems, you'll see that DMC4 is a fantastic game. Bayonetta is good, it's nowhere near as flawed as DMC4, nor does it have any problems like DMC4, but the best parts of DMC4 and its fantastic combat makes up for those problems in my opinion. And this is a message I feel like I've been repeating the whole video. DMC is a mixed bag of greatness and sometimes complete ass, whereas Bayonetta is just a smooth, consistent ride the whole way through. But I prefer DMC4 because of those moments and sparkles of greatness where the developer's true intentions shine through. Also, Nero is pretty cute. And that's the video. Make sure you guys go subscribe if you haven't, and go watch my fucking Asura's Wrath retrospective. I don't really have much to say. I have a lot of videos planned. RE4 video, this other video, a lot more reaction content, some gaming videos. Just some cool shit to see what sticks, man. I don't know. Anyway, you guys know the drill. This was your boy Jugo Young, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!